My wife put me on speaker and said it's over to make her friends laugh. I just replied, okay, I understand, and hung up. The next morning, her mother called her, screaming hysterically, "The house! Dear God, what did you just let him do to the house?" I was reviewing invoices at 9:47 p.m. when the phone lit up. My wife, Vanessa. I answered out of habit, still half focused on a spreadsheet tracking our quarterly expenses. Numbers she never once asked about because, as she told me multiple times, finances are just so boring, Mark. The irony wasn't lost on me. Those boring finances paid for her weekly manicures at that upscale salon downtown, the one that charged $60 just to file her nails. They paid for her ever-expanding collection of streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, that niche documentary platform she watched exactly twice. They covered her weekend flights to Palm Springs when she needed to decompress with friends, staying at boutique hotels that cost more per night than most people's monthly car payments. But the moment I heard laughter in the background, cheap wine being poured, the clink of glasses touching, that hollow echo that only comes from restaurant acoustics, I knew something was off. My finger hovered over the spreadsheet, cursor blinking on a cell I'd been about to update. Then her voice came through, loud, exaggerated, dripping with that fake sympathy she used when she wanted to sound mature, but came off as condescending. "Mark, it's over. Don't text. Don't call. Just move on, okay?" Her friends howled. Someone, I think it was her friend Gabriel, the one who sold leggings through social media, yelled loud enough for me to hear clearly. "Oh my God, he actually picked up!" Another voice, slurred and delighted. "This is iconic." I could picture the scene perfectly. Vanessa at the head of the table, phone held up like a trophy, face flushed from her third glass of rosé. Her friends leaning in, hands covering their mouths, eyes wide with the kind of anticipation you see at a reality TV finale. This was entertainment. I was entertainment. I stared at my computer screen for exactly 3 seconds. The numbers blurred slightly. My jaw tightened, then relaxed. Then I said very calmly, "Okay, I understand," and hung up. 13 seconds total. That's how long it took her to end a 7-year marriage, or at least, that's how long she thought it took. I set my phone face down on the desk. The office was quiet except for the hum of my laptop and the distant sound of our neighbor's dog barking. I took a breath, slow and measured, then reached for my mouse. No yelling, no questions, no begging or demanding explanations, just silence. Then I opened a folder on my desktop labeled Exit V. 11 months of quiet preparation sat inside. Spreadsheets, scanned documents, legal forms with stamps and signatures, authorization letters, account statements, property deeds. A meticulously organized timeline that read like a disaster preparedness manual, because that's exactly what it was. You see, I learned early in our relationship that Vanessa loved chaos and hated paperwork. The chaos fed her. It gave her stories to tell, drama to post about, reasons to call her mother and sigh heavily about how complicated everything was. But paperwork, documentation, responsibility, those things bored her to tears. So while she collected Instagram followers and filmed self-care haul videos where she unwrapped packages she'd bought with our joint credit, which wasn't actually joint, but I'll get to that, I collected signatures, notarizations, and digital authorizations. Every document had a date, every account had a clause, every asset, the house on Willow Lane with its white columns and professional landscaping, the BMW she drove like it was hers, even her joint business credit card she used for brand collaborations was in my name. Legally, irrevocably, documented in triplicate. Her prank wasn't an insult. It was an opportunity. It was the trigger I'd been waiting for. The unmistakable signal that she'd crossed from careless into cruel, and that I no longer owed her the courtesy of a warning. The thing about Vanessa was that she'd always been performative. Even in the beginning, when we first started dating, there was this theatrical quality to everything she did. Our first date had been at a rooftop bar downtown, and she'd spent half the evening positioning her drink for the perfect photo, adjusting the angle 3, 4, 5 times until the sunset hit the glass just right. I found it charming back then. Endearing even. She was vibrant and alive in a way I wasn't, and I thought maybe her light would balance out my darkness. What I didn't realize was that everything with Vanessa was a transaction. Every moment had to have an audience. Every experience had to be documented and validated by strangers online. When she told me she loved me for the first time, 6 months into our relationship on a beach in Santa Monica, she'd made me wait while she set up her phone on a timer to capture the moment. The "I love you" wasn't just for me. It was content. I should have seen the warning signs, but I was lonely, and she was beautiful, and I convinced myself that her need for validation was harmless. Just a generational thing, I told myself. Everyone her age lives on their phones. But it wasn't harmless. It was corrosive, because when everything is content, nothing is sacred. Our engagement wasn't a private moment between two people. It was a 3-minute Instagram story with romantic music and strategic camera angles. Our wedding wasn't a celebration of commitment. It was a branded event with a custom hashtag and a photographer who cost more than my first car. And our marriage? Our marriage was a 7-year performance where I played the supporting role to her main character, and I was too busy keeping the show running to realize I'd never actually been her partner. I'd been her producer. At 10:05 p.m., I logged into our banking portal and revoked her card access with 3 clicks. Her business card, the one she used for essential expenses like designer coffee and influencer conferences, was linked to an account I controlled. Gone, declined, effective immediately. At 10:20 p.m., I paused every shared subscription she'd ever claimed as for work. Netflix, gone. Canva Pro, where she designed her social media graphics, suspended. Her monthly beauty box subscription, the one that cost $47 and arrived like clockwork, even though she never opened half the products, canceled. Even her meditation app, which she'd used 3 times in 6 months, was cut off. I went through the list methodically. The meal delivery service she'd signed up for and forgotten about, canceled. The premium Spotify account she needed for content creation, downgraded to free. The cloud storage where she kept thousands of photos of herself, access revoked. The wine club membership that sent her 2 bottles every month, terminated. Each click felt like removing a thread from a tapestry, and with each thread removed, the picture became clearer. She'd been living a life that was never actually hers. It was borrowed, rented, built on my credit, and sustained by my silence. At 10:33 p.m., I called the locksmith I'd vetted 2 months earlier. "Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp," I said. "I'll text you the address." He didn't ask questions. I'd already prepaid. We'd discussed the job in detail weeks ago. New deadbolts, new garage code, new smart lock system. Everything would be changed, and only I would have the new access codes. Then I made tea. Chamomile, from the loose leaf tin Vanessa bought once, used twice, and forgot about. I poured it into a plain ceramic mug, sat back down at my desk, and reviewed the next phase of my plan. No shaking hands, no angry playlist, no throwing things or punching walls or any of the dramatic reactions she would have posted about if the roles were reversed. Just methodical, surgical silence. Vanessa thought control meant volume. She thought power came from who could yell loudest, who could cry hardest, who could gather the most witnesses to their pain. She never understood that true control sounds like nothing at all. It's the quiet click of a door locking, the soft buzz of an email being sent, the calm, steady rhythm of someone who's been prepared for months and is now simply executing a plan. I opened my email and reviewed the draft messages I'd prepared. One to the property management company for the downtown apartment, terminating her access effective immediately. One to the car dealership, informing them I'd be returning the leased BMW at the end of the month. One to my insurance broker, removing Vanessa as a beneficiary and dependent. I'd written these emails months ago, saving them as drafts, updating them periodically as circumstances changed. All they needed now was a send date. I scheduled them all for 6 a.m. a.m. the next morning, early enough that they'd be processed before Vanessa woke up, late enough that I'd be long gone before anyone tried to reach me. The next step was my lawyer. I'd already briefed Daniel Chen on the possibility of this scenario. We'd had several conversations over the past year, always framed as hypothetical. If a marriage were to end, I'd say, what would the process look like? Daniel was good at his job. He never asked unnecessary questions, just provided clear, actionable information. Now I sent him a single text. Green light. Proceed with phase 2. His response came back within minutes. Understood. Paperwork will be ready by 11 a.m. tomorrow. Phase 2 was the trust transfer. The house on Willow Lane, along with several other assets, would be transferred into an irrevocable trust, the August Foundation. Once that transfer was complete, there would be no reversing it. The property would belong to the foundation, and Vanessa would have zero legal claim to it. I'd established the August Foundation 2 years ago, but I'd been planning for something like it much longer than that. The foundation's mission was simple: provide support and transitional housing for single fathers rebuilding their lives after divorce or separation. Men who'd been overlooked, dismissed, financially devastated by a system that assumed mothers were always the primary caregivers, and fathers were just walking wallets, men like my own father had been. My dad, Augustus, raised me and my sister alone after our mother left when I was 7. She'd decided motherhood wasn't for her, that she needed to find herself, and so she'd walked out one Tuesday morning and never came back. No custody battle, no lengthy divorce proceedings. She just signed away her parental rights and disappeared. I watched my father work 3 jobs to keep us fed. Watched him fall asleep at the kitchen table with bills spread out in front of him, calculator in hand, dark circles under his eyes. Watched him skip meals so my sister and I could eat. Watched him age 10 years in the span of 2. And when he'd try to ask for help from the state, from charities, from anyone, he'd be turned away. Resources are limited, they'd say. We prioritize women and children, as if he wasn't raising children, as if his struggle was somehow less valid because of his gender. He died of a heart attack when I was 19. The doctor said it was genetic, but I knew better. It was stress. It was exhaustion. It was the slow, grinding weight of trying to do everything alone with no support system. I'd promised myself that if I ever had the resources, I'd create what my father never had, a safety net for men like him. The August Foundation was that promise, fulfilled, and now it would also serve another purpose, ensuring that Vanessa could never claim I'd acted out of spite or cruelty. Because how do you argue that someone is punishing you when they're actively helping other people? How do you spin charitable giving as revenge? You can't. I finished my tea, rinsed the mug, and placed it in the dishwasher. Then I did something I almost never allowed myself to do. I opened a photo album on my phone. Not the shared cloud album Vanessa had access to, my private one. I scrolled through photos of us from the early days. Vanessa laughing at something I'd said, eyes crinkled at the corners, genuinely happy. Me with my arm around her shoulders, both of us squinting into the sun. A selfie she'd taken of us in bed on a lazy Sunday morning, hair messy, smiles soft and unguarded. There had been good moments, real moments, times when I believed we were building something together, but those moments had become fewer and further between over the years. Somewhere along the line, I'd stopped being her partner and started being her ATM, her photographer, her audience of one, applauding her performance while she took bow after bow. I closed the photo album and deleted it. No need to keep those anymore. Then I packed a bag, just the essentials, clothes, toiletries, my laptop, important documents. I'd been slowly moving things to my new apartment for weeks, one box at a time. Always when Vanessa was out with friends or at a yoga class, she'd stopped attending after the first month, but kept paying for because she liked the idea of being someone who does yoga. By 11:30 p.m. I was ready. I looked around the office one last time. My office, really, since Vanessa never came in here. Too boring, she'd said. Too much like work. I turned off the lights and walked out of the house on Willow Lane for the last time. The next morning, Vanessa probably woke up around 10:40 a.m. I know her patterns. I'd lived with them for 7 years. She'd have opened her eyes slowly, head pounding from too much wine, mouth dry and sour. The hotel room, or wherever she'd crashed with her friends after their big performance, would be too bright. Sunlight cutting through cheap curtains she forgot to close. Her phone would be somewhere on the floor, screen cracked maybe, battery at 11%. She'd check it out of habit, scroll through Instagram, see the photos from last night. The group shot where everyone's holding their wine glasses up, the candid of her mid-laugh, the story she posted with the caption, "Sometimes you just have to choose you." 43 likes, 12 comments, "Yas, queen, proud of you. You deserve better." She'd smile to herself, still smug, still convinced she'd done something empowering. Then she'd try to buy breakfast. I can picture it perfectly. She walks into that trendy cafe on 3rd Street, the one with the exposed brick and the overpriced avocado toast. She orders her usual truffle omelet, oat milk latte, maybe a side of those candied bacon strips she pretends to feel guilty about eating. The barista rings it up, $28. Vanessa taps her card, declined. She frowns, taps it again. Sometimes the machine is glitchy. Declined. Sorry, the barista says, not making eye contact. "Do you have another card?" Vanessa laughs it off. "Oh, weird. Yeah, hold on." She pulls out the backup card, the business one, taps, declined. Now she's flustered. People are starting to notice. The line behind her is getting impatient. A guy in a suit checks his watch pointedly. A woman with a yoga mat sighs. Her face flushes, not from wine this time, but from embarrassment. I don't understand," she stammers. "These cards always work." The barista offers a thin, professional smile. "No worries. Maybe call your bank?" Vanessa steps aside, hands trembling slightly as she dials the customer service number on the back of the card. The automated voice asks her to enter her account number. She does. Then it asks her to verify her identity. "We're sorry, but we cannot locate an active account under that information." She hangs up, tries the other card. Same result. That's when it starts to sink in. That's when the smug smile from this morning begins to crack. She'd pull out her phone and try to check the bank account online. Password incorrect. She tries again. Account locked. She tries calling me. Straight to voicemail. Gabrielle, standing beside her, would notice something's wrong. "V, you okay?" "My cards aren't working," Vanessa would say, voice tight. "I don't understand. Maybe it's fraud protection?" Gabrielle would suggest. "That happened to me once when I was traveling." But Vanessa wouldn't be traveling. She'd be 10 miles from home, and the sick feeling in her stomach would be telling her this wasn't fraud protection. This was something else. She'd call her mother, half laughing still, trying to make it sound like a minor inconvenience. "Mom, something weird is happening. Mark's being dramatic about last night." Her mother, Patricia, wouldn't laugh. Patricia never liked me, thought I was too quiet, too emotionally unavailable, but she respected my precision. She knew I didn't do anything without a reason. I can hear Patricia's voice in my head, low and careful. "What exactly did you say to him, Vanessa?" "It was just a joke. I told him it was over." On speaker. The girls thought it was funny. Silence. Then, quiet and cold. "You told him it was over? On speaker? With witnesses?" "Mom, relax. He knows I wasn't serious. And you better pray he thought so too." Patricia would remember things Vanessa had forgotten, or more accurately, things Vanessa had never paid attention to in the first place. She'd remember me pulling her aside at the wedding reception, asking her politely but firmly to sign as a witness on the prenuptial agreement. She'd remember the look in my eyes, not love-struck or nervous like most grooms, but focused and methodical. She'd sensed something then, something careful and guarded in me, but she dismissed it as pre-wedding jitters. Now she'd be putting the pieces together, and she'd be realizing that her daughter had just made a catastrophic mistake. Meanwhile, I was 2 hours away, sitting in my lawyer's office. Daniel Chen had been my attorney for 6 years. Corporate law, estate planning, the occasional contract dispute. He was efficient, discreet, and expensive, but worth every dollar. His office was in one of those modern buildings downtown, all glass and steel, with furniture that cost more than most people's cars. The kind of place that immediately communicated communicated seriousness and competence. "Everything's ready," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "The final authorization just needs your signature." I flipped through the pages. The trust documents were immaculate. The August Foundation, a non-profit I'd established 2 years ago to support single fathers rebuilding their lives after divorce or separation, was about to receive its largest donation yet. 1 house, 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths. Appraised value $1.3 million. "Once you sign," Daniel continued, adjusting his glasses, "the transfer is immediate and irrevocable. The property will be titled to the foundation. It'll be used as transitional housing for men in the program. We've already identified 3 candidates who could move in within the month." He showed me photos of the men who'd been selected. Jerome, a 42-year-old high school teacher who'd lost his house in a divorce and was living in his sister's basement while trying to maintain custody of his 2 daughters. Raymond, a 36-year-old veteran who'd returned from deployment to find his ex-wife, had cleaned out their accounts and moved across the country with their son. Tyler, a 29-year-old graphic designer who was sleeping in his car while paying child support that left him with less than $300 a month for everything else. These were good men. Men who'd played by the rules and gotten crushed anyway. Men who deserved a second chance. "You're sure about this?" Daniel asked, not because he doubted me, but because it was his job to ask. "Once this is filed, there's no reversing it. The house is gone. Completely." I picked up the pen, a heavy Monty Blanc that Daniel kept for signing important documents, and I signed. My signature was steady, unhurried. I dated it, initialed each page, slid the folder back across the desk. "I'll file this within the hour," Daniel said. "The transfer should be complete by close of business today. The locksmith is scheduled for 8 a.m., correct?" "Already done," I said. "He finished at 9. Daniel nodded approvingly. "You've thought of everything." "I've had time to think." He leaned back in his chair, studying me with the kind of clinical interest a scientist might show a particularly fascinating specimen. "If you don't mind me asking, and you're welcome to tell me it's none of my business, how long have you been planning this?" I considered the question. "Planning? About 11 months. But preparing? Probably since the day we got married." "That's a long time to live with that kind of uncertainty." "It was the only way to live with certainty," I replied. "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst." Daniel smiled slightly. It wasn't a happy smile, more like recognition. "My divorce cost me $140,000 in 2 years of my life. I wish I'd had your foresight." By 11:15 a.m., the house deed had transferred, legally, irrevocably, permanently, out of my name and into the foundation's. Vanessa's name had never been on it to begin with. Legally, she'd been a guest in my home for 7 years. A guest who'd overstayed her welcome. At 1 p.m., the locksmith texted, "Job complete, new keys ready." By 3 p.m., the realtor I'd hired, not to sell the house, but to document its condition for the foundation's records, had uploaded listing photos to a secure server. Professional shots, staged furniture, everything looked pristine, impersonal, ready for its next chapter. The realtor, Catherine Wu, was a consummate professional who'd worked with nonprofits before. She understood that this wasn't about profit, it was about presentation. The foundation needed quality photos for their website, for grant applications, for the press release I had planned. "Beautiful property," she'd said when she arrived that morning. "Your wife has excellent taste in interior design." "Thank you," I'd replied, not correcting her. Let her think Vanessa had contributed something of value. It didn't matter anymore. I didn't smile, I didn't celebrate. I just closed my laptop, packed a duffel bag with the essentials I'd already moved to my new apartment, and left. The apartment I'd rented was in a different part of the city. A modest 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood where nobody knew me and nobody cared about my business. It wasn't flashy, no amenities beyond a basic gym and a laundry room, but it was mine, truly, completely mine. My name on the lease, my furniture, my rules. I'd been furnishing it slowly over the past few months. A couch from IKEA, a bed from Costco, kitchen supplies from Target. Nothing expensive, nothing fancy, just functional, comfortable, sufficient. It was everything the house on Willow Lane wasn't. That house had been a showcase, a stage set designed for Vanessa's performances. This apartment was a home, designed for living. That evening my phone started buzzing. Voicemails, texts, missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Vanessa's friends, probably, trying to piece together what was happening. The first text came from Gabriel. "Mark, what's going on?" "V says you locked her out." Then Sophia. "This is really mature, Mark. Real classy." Then Alexis. "She was joking. You know that, right?" I didn't respond to any of them. They weren't owed an explanation. They'd been witnesses to Vanessa's cruelty, laughing along, encouraging it. They'd made their choice about whose side they were on. Now they could live with it. Instead, I forwarded a scheduled press release to a journalist I'd been cultivating for months. Amanda Torres from the City Tribune. She specialized in human interest stories, the kind that made people feel good about their community. I'd met her at a charity event 6 months ago, and we'd stayed in touch. Nothing inappropriate, just professional networking. I'd mentioned my foundation work in passing, gauging her interest. She'd been very interested. Now I sent her an exclusive, the story of the house donation, complete with professional photos, background on the August Foundation, and a carefully worded statement about the importance of supporting single fathers. Her response came within an hour. "This is exactly the kind of story we need right now. Can I run it tomorrow morning?" "Please do," I replied. At 9 a.m. the next morning, the article went live on the Tribune's website and social media. Local entrepreneur donates $1.3 million home to foundation for single fathers in recovery. The piece was glowing. It talked about the August Foundation's mission. It featured quotes from men who'd been through the program. It included statistics about how single fathers are overlooked in social services, and buried in the middle was a single line from me, provided anonymously through my lawyer. "Sometimes the quietest men leave the loudest lessons." Within an hour, the article had been shared 300 times. Within 2 hours, 1,000. Local influencers were reposting it, calling it inspiring and beautiful. A city council member commented that she'd look into additional funding for similar programs. The narrative was set. I was the generous philanthropist, the quiet good guy making a difference. And Vanessa? Well, anyone who'd seen her post from 2 nights ago, the wine glasses, the celebration, the caption about choosing herself, could do the math. I didn't read the comments, didn't need to. The message was out. The documentation was public. The house was gone. Not sold, not leveraged, not hidden in some shell company. Given away to people who needed it. Vanessa couldn't fight charity. She couldn't spin this as me being cruel or vindictive. How do you argue against a man who donated his own home to help struggling fathers? Around 9:27 a.m., Patricia called Vanessa. I know this because Vanessa's neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski, an elderly woman who'd always been kind to me and considerably less warm to Vanessa, later told me that she'd heard screaming that morning. Not Vanessa screaming, Patricia screaming through the phone, loud enough to be audible from the driveway. "The house. Dear God, Vanessa, what did you just let him do to the house?" Vanessa, standing in the driveway of that house, staring at the new lock she couldn't open, probably went pale. "What are you talking about? He gave it away. It's all over the news. He donated the entire property to some foundation." That's not possible. He can't just..." "He can, and he did. Your name was never on the deed, Vanessa. You don't have a claim. You don't have standing. You don't have anything." I imagine Vanessa's knees buckled. I imagine she sat down right there on the front steps, the same steps where she'd filmed a dozen Instagram stories about home life and gratitude. "But I live here," she whispered. "No," Patricia said, voice hard. "You live there." Past tense. Mrs. Kowalski told me that Vanessa sat on those steps for almost 2 hours, staring at her phone, occasionally crying, sometimes laughing in a way that sounded slightly unhinged. At one point, she tried to open the garage door using the remote in her car. It didn't work. I'd had the codes changed along with everything else. Eventually, she got in her car and drove away. Mrs. Kowalski never saw her at the house again. By then I was gone. on. My new place didn't have marble countertops or imported Italian tiles, no walk-in closets, no infinity pool, just a small 2-bedroom apartment with a balcony that overlooked a park. The day after the press release went live, I drove to the animal shelter and adopted a dog, a 3-year-old mixed breed named Chester, who'd been overlooked for months because he wasn't a puppy, wasn't a purebred, wasn't Instagram worthy. He cost me $80, best money I ever spent. We sat on my porch, my plain, unremarkable porch, and I scratched behind his ears while he leaned against my leg, completely content. No drama, no performance, no audience, just peace. Vanessa didn't believe it at first. Even standing in front of the house with new locks glinting in the morning sun, even with her mother's frantic voice still echoing in her ears, some part of her brain refused to accept that this was real. Mark was Mark. Boring. Predictable Mark. The man who color-coded his file folders and set reminders for oil changes. The man who asked if she needed anything from the grocery store and never complained when she spent $200 on a purse. Mark didn't do things like this. Mark didn't have it in him. She tried her key one more time, jamming it into the lock with enough force to scratch the brass. It didn't turn. Of course it didn't turn. The lock was new. The locksmith had probably finished his work hours ago while she was still sleeping off her performance. This is insane, she muttered, pulling out her phone. Her hands were shaking now, not from cold, but from something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like fear. She called me, straight to voicemail. She called again. Same result. She tried texting. Mark, seriously, what is this? Call me back. The message showed as delivered but not read. I'd turned off read receipts months ago. Another small preparation she'd never noticed. Then her phone started buzzing with notifications. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. People were tagging her. Lots of people. She opened Instagram first. There it was, pinned at the top of her feed. The article from the Tribune, shared by someone she went to college with, then someone from her yoga class, then one of the local mom bloggers she followed. The same photo of the house she'd posted 100 times. But now the caption wasn't about her morning routine or her gratitude practice. It was about charitable giving and single fathers and foundations she'd never heard of. And there, in the comments, people were connecting the dots. Wait, isn't this the girl who was posting about choosing herself last night? She broke up with him and he donated the house? Imagine fumbling this badly. Vanessa sat down on the front steps, my front steps, legally speaking, and tried to think. Her head still hurt from the wine. Her mouth tasted like regret and bad decisions. But underneath the hangover, a new realization was crystallizing. She'd miscalculated. She thought the phone call would be like all the other times she'd pushed me. The time she accidentally told her friends I was boring in bed. I'd overheard from the next room and said nothing. The time she used our joint credit card to buy a $3,000 handbag for work, and I'd simply adjusted our budget to accommodate it. The time she'd posted a photo with the caption, "When your partner doesn't understand your dreams," after I questioned whether her third influencer conference of the year was really necessary. Every time I'd absorbed it, adjusted, accommodated, she thought I was weak. She thought my silence meant acceptance. She never understood that I was documenting everything, building a case, waiting for the moment when she'd go too far, when she'd give me the legal and moral justification to do what I'd been preparing to do for nearly a year. That moment had come, and I'd been ready. By 10 a.m., Vanessa's phone was ringing constantly. First, it was Gabrielle. "Babe, I just saw something online. Did Mark donate your house?" Then Sophia, is this real? There's an article about some foundation and it shows your address. Then Alexis. V, what the hell is happening? Vanessa didn't answer any of them. Instead, she opened her social media and watched her carefully constructed world begin to collapse in real time. The article had been shared 47 times already. Her neighbors had seen it. Her old co-workers, people from high school she hadn't spoken to in a decade. The comments were brutal. Imagine getting dumped so hard your ex gives away the whole house. She's been posting about that house for years. I can't believe it was never hers. This is what happens when you treat people like props. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Someone had even dug up her post from the night before, the one with the wine glasses, and screenshot it next to the headline about the donation. The juxtaposition was damning. Her celebrating while I was already executing my exit. One comment in particular caught her eye. Notice how he didn't sell it, didn't trade it, gave it away to help people. Meanwhile, she's out here treating their relationship like a joke. Who's laughing now? 237 likes on that comment. Vanessa's carefully curated image was fracturing in real time. She was supposed to be the protagonist of this story, the woman who left because she deserved better, the brave soul choosing herself. Instead, she was becoming the villain, the ungrateful wife who mocked her husband and lost everything. Her follower count started dropping, slowly at first, 5 followers, 10, 20, then faster. She watched the number tick down like a countdown clock. Every lost follower felt like a tiny rejection, a small vote of no confidence. By noon, she'd lost over 300 followers. People were unfollowing her in real time, and worse, they were commenting on her old posts. Under a photo of her in the kitchen making smoothies. That's not even your kitchen, lol. Under a selfie captioned, "Home is where the heart is." Well, not anymore. Under a post about relationship goals, this aged like milk. At 11:30 a.m., Vanessa received a text from a number she didn't recognize. "This is Daniel Chen, Mark's attorney. We need to speak regarding the property at 847 Willow Lane and your personal belongings. Please call this number at your earliest convenience." Her stomach dropped. Attorney. Of course Mark had an attorney. Of course this was all planned. Of course every single thing she'd assumed about her life was wrong. She called the number with trembling fingers. Daniel answered on the second ring. His voice was professional, neutral, the kind of tone that revealed nothing. "Miss Reed, thank you for calling." "What's happening?" Vanessa demanded, her voice cracking slightly. "Why can't I get into my house?" "The property at 847 Willow Lane is no longer under Mr. Ellis's ownership. As of yesterday morning, it was transferred to the August Foundation, a registered 501c3 non-profit organization. But I live there. According to our records, you are not listed on the property deed, the mortgage, or any rental agreement. You are not legally a tenant." Vanessa felt like the ground was tilting. The world was spinning and she was trying to hold on to something solid, but everything was slipping through her fingers. "That's insane. We're married. It's our house. California is a community property state," Daniel acknowledged, his tone still infuriatingly calm and measured. "However, the property was purchased prior to your marriage, using funds from Mr. Ellis's separate assets. You signed a prenuptial agreement waiving claims to any property acquired before the marriage." "I never signed a prenup." There was a pause, a significant pause, the kind of pause that communicates worlds of information in its silence. "Ms. Reed, I have your signature on file. Notarized and dated March 15th, 2018. Vanessa's mind raced back. March 2018. They'd gotten married in April, just a few weeks before the wedding. She remembered Mark asking her to sign some papers. They'd been at dinner, that nice Italian place she liked, and he'd pulled out a folder between the appetizer and the main course. "Just standard stuff," he'd said. "Marriage license paperwork, insurance beneficiaries, banking stuff. The lawyer said we should get it done before the wedding, so there's no last-minute scrambling." She'd been busy planning the wedding, picking out flowers and arguing with the caterer about vegan options, and obsessing over whether the bridesmaids' dresses were the right shade of blush. Paperwork was boring. Mark handled boring things. That was the arrangement. She'd signed where he pointed, initialed where he indicated, barely glanced at what any of it said. "Your personal belongings have been packed and placed in storage," Daniel continued, his voice unchanging, as if he were reading a grocery list. "Unit 714 at Secure Space on Hamilton Avenue. The first month is prepaid. You'll receive access information via email within the hour." "You can't just throw me out. You were never legally a resident, Ms. Reed. This isn't an eviction. This is notification that the property property has changed hands, and you no longer have authorization to be there. The words hit her like physical blows. Never a resident. No authorization. Changed hands. Her entire life. Boxed up and put in storage like old Christmas decorations. Vanessa's voice cracked. I want to talk to Mark. Mr. Ellis has instructed me to handle all communication moving forward. This is cruel. This is Ms. Reed, Daniel interrupted gently, though there was steel underneath the gentleness. I suggest you consult with your own attorney, but I should inform you that any claims you might consider filing would be difficult to substantiate given the recorded evidence from Wednesday evening. Vanessa froze. Her blood turned to ice. What recorded evidence? The phone call on speaker with multiple witnesses present. You verbally ended the relationship, Miss Reed. You stated, and I quote, "It's over. Don't text, don't call, just move on." Mr. Ellis simply acted on your declaration. She couldn't breathe. The wine-soaked laughter from that night echoed in her memory. The phone held up like a trophy. Her friends cheering her on. The applause. The validation. She'd thought it was funny. She'd thought it was harmless. She'd thought Mark would be hurt, maybe, or embarrassed, and would come crawling back begging for forgiveness. And she'd have that power, that control, that proof that she was the one who mattered. She'd thought wrong. Mr. Ellis was very clear, Daniel continued. He wants this to be as painless as possible. Your belongings are safe. The storage is paid through the end of the month. After that, you'll need to make your own arrangements. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Vanessa wanted to scream. Wanted to throw her phone. Wanted to break something. Anything. To externalize the chaos rioting inside her chest. But all she could manage was a whispered, "No. Then I wish you the best, Miss Reed. You'll receive the storage access information shortly." He hung up. Vanessa sat there on the steps of what used to be her house, phone still pressed to her ear, listening to dead air. By noon, Vanessa was sitting in her car in the driveway, crying. Not the pretty, photogenic crying she sometimes performed for sympathy, where she'd tilt her head just so and dab at her eyes carefully to preserve her makeup. Real, ugly crying. The kind that leaves your face blotchy and your eyes swollen and your breath coming in jagged gasps. The kind where snot runs down your face and you don't even care. The kind that comes from watching your entire life implode in the span of 12 hours. Her phone kept buzzing. More texts, more calls, more social media notifications. She turned it face down on the passenger seat, unable to look at it anymore. A car pulled up behind her. For a moment, her heart leapt. Mark, maybe, coming to tell her this was all a misunderstanding, that they could fix this, but no, it was her mother. Patricia got out of her silver Honda looking grim and determined, like a general arriving at a battlefield. She knocked on Vanessa's window. Vanessa unlocked the doors. Patricia slid into the passenger seat and immediately pulled her daughter into a hug. Vanessa collapsed against her, sobbing into her mother's shoulder, the way she hadn't done since she was a child. "I know, baby," Patricia murmured, stroking her hair. "I know. How did this happen?" Vanessa gasped between sobs. "How did I not see this coming?" Patricia pulled back and looked at her daughter with a mixture of sympathy and exasperation. "Because you didn't want to see it. You were too busy performing your life to notice you were living in someone else's. What does that even mean?" "It means," Patricia said carefully, "that you spent 7 years treating Mark like he was part of the set decoration. You never once asked him how he felt, never once considered what he might be thinking. You assumed he'd always be there, always be available, always be yours to use however you wanted. That's not fair, isn't it?" Patricia's voice was sharp now. "When was the last time you asked him about his day, about his work, about anything that didn't directly affect you?" Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. She tried to remember, came up empty. "That's what I thought," Patricia said quietly. "Baby, I love you, but you've been selfish, and selfish people eventually find themselves alone. He didn't have to do this," Vanessa said, anger creeping into her voice. "He didn't have to humiliate me. He could have just talked to me. And would you have listened?" Silence. "Come on," Patricia said, starting the car. "You're staying with me tonight. We'll figure the rest out tomorrow." As they drove away, Vanessa looked back at the house one last time. The house she'd thought was hers. The house she'd photographed and posted and used as proof that she'd made it, that she was successful, that she was living her best life. It had never been hers at all. Over the next few days, the full scope of my preparation became clear to Vanessa. Each new discovery was like peeling back another layer of a carefully constructed plan, revealing just how thoroughly I'd anticipated every possible contingency. The apartment downtown, the one she'd been using as her creative space, where she filmed content and met with brand representatives, was titled in my name. She received an eviction notice on Thursday. 30 days to vacate, though she wouldn't even last that long because the key card stopped working within 48 hours. The BMW she drove, the one she'd customized with a vanity plate that read, "Blessed," ironic now, was leased under my company. The lease termination notice arrived via certified mail on Friday. The car was to be returned by the following Monday. The credit card she used for her business expenses, the coffees with potential collaborators, the clothes for content creation, the equipment and props and ring lights were all authorized user accounts, not joint ownership. They were canceled within a week. Even her health insurance was through my employer. Her coverage would end at the month's close. One by one, I revoked everything. Every authorization I'd given her, I now withdrew. Every courtesy I'd extended, I now retracted. It wasn't vindictive. It was methodical. Every action had been anticipated, planned for, documented in that Exit V folder that had sat on my desktop for nearly a year. She declared our relationship over on speakerphone with witnesses. I was simply honoring her decision. Vanessa tried to fight back. She started by calling her friend Madison, who worked in HR at a tech company and knew about legal stuff. Madison listened to the whole story, occasionally making sympathetic noises, but when Vanessa finished, there was a long pause. "V," Madison finally said, "I hate to say this, but you don't have a case. If his name is on everything and you verbally ended the relationship in front of witnesses, any lawyer is going to tell you to walk away." "But that's not fair." "Fair doesn't matter. Legal matters. And legally, he's covered." She tried to spin it on social media, posted a vague story. When you realize you never really knew someone, trust your gut, ladies. The comments weren't sympathetic. "Girl, you're the one who dumped him on speakerphone." Maybe you should have read the lease before claiming it was your apartment. At least he donated the house to charity instead of just selling it out of spite. Imagine playing yourself this hard. She deleted the story after 20 minutes, but screenshots had already circulated. Nothing on the internet ever really disappears. She tried calling some of her old friends from college, people she thought might take her side. Most didn't answer. The ones who did were awkward, non-committal. They'd seen the article, they'd seen her posts. They were staying neutral, which meant they were siding with me. The narrative had been set, and Vanessa was on the wrong side of it. By the end of the week, Vanessa had moved in with her mother. All her belongings were in storage. Clothes, makeup, tech equipment, the ring light she'd spent $300 on, the camera she'd financed and never quite paid off. Everything boxed up in a 10 by 10 unit that smelled like must and failure. Her social media following continued dropping. Not dramatically, she wasn't important enough for a dramatic fall, but steadily, consistently, like a slow leak that eventually empties the tank. She built her identity on being aspirational, on showing people the life she had, the beautiful house, the luxury car, the designer clothes, the effortless glamour. But now people knew the truth. It was never her life. It was mine. She'd just been living in it. Vanessa spent her days scrolling through her phone, watching her old content with new eyes. Every post was a lie. Every caption about gratitude was hollow. Every photo of her home was stolen valor. She'd been a squatter in someone else's success, and she'd convinced herself and thousands of strangers that she'd earned it. She hadn't earned anything. She'd just been lucky enough to meet someone who was generous, and stupid enough to take that generosity for granted. 2 weeks after the phone call, Vanessa hit what she thought was rock bottom. She was wrong. She hadn't even started falling yet. It started with a voicemail. She'd left me 40 43 voicemails over the course of 3 weeks. I know the exact number because my phone kept count, each one a little notification I dismissed without listening. But then one morning, Vanessa woke up to a voicemail on her phone, not from me, from an unknown number. She played it while still in bed at her mother's house, the small guest room that smelled like lavender potpourri and disappointment. Hey, it's Cassie. Cassie, not Vanessa. Her own voice, but saying the wrong name. Except, wait, she listened more carefully. It was her voice, but from months ago, from a conversation she'd half forgotten. A wine-drunk afternoon when she'd called me from an Uber to pick a meaningless fight. You were always just the safe choice. I needed excitement. Her own voice continued. I mean, yeah, you paid for everything, but at what cost? God, Mark. Sometimes I felt like I was dating a spreadsheet. Then, click. The message ended. Vanessa sat up, heart pounding. Someone had recorded that call. Someone, me, obviously, had kept it, and now someone had sent it to her to make sure she knew they had it. She checked her email. There it was, sent from an anonymous account, the audio file with a single line of text. Records are public. Consider your next steps carefully. Her hands were shaking. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about reputation, about proof, about evidence that could be used against her. She rushed to her laptop and started Googling herself. That's when she found it. The charity board. The Riverside Children's Charity Board, where she'd been a member for 2 years, or more accurately, where she'd attended 4 meetings total, and mostly just showed up for the annual gala photo opportunities. An email sent to the board members and CC'd to a public mailing list. Dear Ms. Reed, effective immediately. Your status as a member of the Riverside Children's Charity Board is terminated. Attached is a transcript of correspondence received, which has been formally reviewed and deemed incompatible with the values of our organization. Attached was a PDF. Inside was a transcript of her voicemail, word for word, highlighted, time-stamped, archived like evidence in a trial. No sign-off, no sympathy, just termination. The charity, one of the last things tethering her to legitimacy, to public good, to the reputation she flaunted in every online bio, had cut her loose, not with a warning, with a bullet. Vanessa tried calling the board chair, straight to voicemail. She tried the vice chair, same. The executive director, nothing. She'd been erased, quietly, efficiently, without ceremony. Then she searched her own name on Twitter. Bad idea. Terrible idea. But she couldn't stop herself. Someone had leaked the audio. Just a clip. 16 seconds. But it was already racking up likes, shares, comments. Another trust fund leech bites the dust. Dating a spreadsheet? LMAO the entitlement. Imagine biting the hand that feeds you, then acting surprised when it stops. And the worst one, he recorded everything. This man is a legend. Vanessa's profile was still public. Her DMs were flooding. Most were hate messages, people calling her entitled, spoiled, ungrateful. Some were from men's rights activists who'd latched onto her story as proof of female manipulation. Some were from random strangers offering unsolicited advice on how to be a better person. She'd spent years curating that image. The aspirational lifestyle blogger. The relatable but successful influencer. The woman who had it all figured out. Gone. Deleted. Replaced with a new image. The cautionary tale. Her modeling agent, who she hadn't heard from in months since the skincare sponsorship fell through, sent her a brief email. Given recent developments, we think it's best if we part ways. Best of luck in your future endeavors. Even her yoga studio, the one she'd gone to twice and never returned to, unfollowed her on Instagram. Every bridge she'd ever stood on was either on fire or had already collapsed, and standing in the middle of the rubble was her, alone, finally understanding what Mark had known all along. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful one. 3 weeks after the phone call, Vanessa stood in front of the house on Willow Lane one more time. She'd worn a ball cap pulled low, sunglasses too big for her face, and a hoodie zipped all the way up despite the 82-degree heat. She looked like someone trying not to be recognized, which was exactly what she was. She'd parked 2 blocks away and walked, taking the long route through the neighborhood she'd once considered hers. Mrs. Kowalski had been watering her garden and had pretended not to see her. The Johnsons across the street had been loading groceries and had very deliberately looked away. Everyone knew. Of course everyone knew. The article had made sure of that. She approached the house through the side entrance, the garden gate she'd had installed because it made the property feel more European. She'd never imagined she'd one day be using it like a trespasser trying not to be seen. From inside, she could hear voices. Professional, upbeat, the sound of polite laughter. An open house, of course. The foundation would need to showcase the property, bring in potential residents, show donors how their money was being used. She peeked through the glass doors leading into the kitchen and saw them. A young couple in their 30s, holding hands, pointing out the countertop finishes she had personally picked, asking questions about the appliances, admiring the backsplash. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was seeing Sophie, Mark's executive assistant, standing beside them with a clipboard, smiling professionally, explaining the foundation's mission and the application process for residency. Sophie, early 20s, efficient, surgically pleasant. She'd once fetched Vanessa oat milk lattes during campaign events. Now she stood in what used to be Vanessa's kitchen, like she owned the place. Vanessa pushed the door open. It wasn't locked. Why would it be? During an open house. Sophie looked up, didn't flinch, just smiled that same professional smile. Hi, Vanessa. Not hostile, not uncomfortable, just neutral, like they were acquaintances running into each other at a coffee shop. Vanessa's voice came out tight. What are you doing here? Managing the viewing, Sophie replied calmly. She turned slightly toward the couple. Would you two excuse me for just a moment? Feel free to look at the sunroom. Those windows are original, by the way. The couple smiled politely and drifted away, clearly sensing tension, but too Minnesota nice to acknowledge it. Sophie turned back to Vanessa. Is there something I can help you with? I want to talk to Mark. He's not available. Then get him on the phone. Sophie's expression didn't change. Vanessa, you don't have standing here. You're not a tenant. You're not a stakeholder. And you're not on any of the sale documentation. If you stay, it's technically trespassing. The words were delivered kindly, almost gently, but they hit like hammers. You're threatening me? Vanessa asked, voice rising. Seriously? You're his assistant and you're threatening me? I'm reminding you of the legal reality, Sophie corrected, which your attorney should have already explained. I don't have a lawyer, Vanessa snapped. Sophie didn't respond to that. Instead, she reached into her briefcase, leather, expensive, probably a gift from Mark, and pulled out a thick manila envelope sealed with a sticker bearing the August Foundation's logo. She extended it toward Vanessa. What's this? Vanessa demanded. Closure. Vanessa snatched it, tore it open with shaking hands. Inside was a single glossy photograph, a still from the night of the prank call, pulled from someone's social media. Vanessa on speaker, wine glass raised in a toast, mouth wide open in mid-laugh, frozen in the exact moment she'd said, "It's over. Don't text, don't call." There was a yellow post-it note stuck to the bottom of the photo, handwritten in Mark's precise script. Always read the room, and the contract. Vanessa stared at the photo. She looked so happy, so confident, so certain of her power in that moment, but now it felt like looking at a stranger, like looking at someone who had no idea what was coming. This is sick, she said, her voice shaking. This is psychotic. He planned this entire circus just to humiliate me. No, Sophie said, and for the first time there was something like emotion in her voice. Not sympathy, but a kind of tired patience. He planned it to protect himself and end things cleanly. You made it public. The speakerphone breakup, the Instagram story, the caption about him being your retirement plan. You lit the match, Vanessa. He just made sure you couldn't burn anything that wasn't already yours. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around at the house. Her house. Except it wasn't. It had never been. The dining table was gone, replaced with different furniture. The couch had been swapped out for minimalist staging pieces. The wine rack was empty. The rose bush in the backyard had been trimmed into neat submission. Her chaos had been edited out of every corner. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a transaction, a property, a charitable asset. She looked back at Sophie, that young woman who used to bring her coffee, and now stood in her kitchen like it was the most natural thing in the world. Tell him he's a coward, Vanessa said. I'm just the assistant, Sophie replied evenly. Vanessa stepped back toward the door, still clutching the envelope like it might morph into something she could use, some weapon or shield. I hope he's proud of this, she hissed. Sophie's expression didn't change. He doesn't feel anything about it. He's done. The words landed with devastating simplicity. Done. Not angry, not hurt, not vindictive. Just done. Vanessa turned and walked out. The couple in the sunroom didn't even notice. No one followed her. No one called after her. She wasn't the ghost of that house. She was just noise. And even that had finally been silenced. When Vanessa got back to her car, she sat in the driver's seat for a long time, just staring at the photo in the envelope. That version of herself, confident, laughing, surrounded by friends, so certain she was in control, felt like it belonged to a different lifetime, a different person. She thought she was the one with power because she was the one making the scene, forcing the drama, controlling the narrative. But Mark had understood something she never did. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need witnesses or validation or applause. Real power is quiet. It's documentation. It's preparation. It's knowing exactly what you're going to do months before anyone else even realizes there's a problem. She started her car and drove away from Willow Lane for the last time. The house would go on without her. The foundation would use it to help men rebuild their lives. Mark would continue his work, quiet and methodical and purposeful. And Vanessa would have to figure out who she was when she wasn't performing, when she didn't have an audience, when she couldn't post her way out of consequences. It was going to be a long, painful process, but for the first time in years, she was going to have to do it alone. At exactly 8 a.m. the following Monday, the digital ink dried on the final county recorder's document. The house, 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, 1 pool, 2 fireplaces, and 0 remaining emotional attachments, was now legally, irrevocably, permanently owned by the August Foundation for Single Fathers. The title had been signed over, notarized, reviewed, approved, and uploaded, along with a press release timed to hit inboxes at 9:01 a.m. The press release was carefully worded, vetted by 3 different attorneys, designed to tell the story I wanted told while remaining legally bulletproof. The August Foundation is honored to announce the donation of a fully furnished residence in Crestmore, valued at $1.3 million. The donor, who wishes to remain anonymous, stated, "Sometimes the loudest lessons are taught in silence. This home will provide stability for fathers who have been overlooked for too long." It was picked up by every local news outlet within hours. By noon, it had been shared across social media platforms. By evening, it had been featured on 3 different feel-good news segments. The narrative was set. The good guy donates his house to help struggling fathers. A heartwarming story of generosity and community support. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away on a porch that faced no ocean, no city skyline, no Instagram-worthy view, just a quiet field and a dog I'd adopted, Mark Ellis sat with his morning coffee and watched the sunrise. Chester sat at my feet, ears flicking in rhythm with the wind. My phone buzzed once, a notification confirming the deed transfer had finalized. I didn't open it, didn't check email, didn't call anyone to celebrate or gloat. I simply took another sip of coffee. Good coffee. The kind I actually liked instead of the expensive stuff Vanessa insisted on buying for the aesthetic, and leaned back in my chair. No anger, no regret, no noise, just peace. Vanessa built her world on attention, on chaos, on the constant need for validation from strangers. She needed witnesses for everything, needed applause, needed proof that she mattered. I built my world on silence, on preparation, on understanding that the most powerful moves are the ones nobody sees coming. And when our 2 worlds collided, only one of us survived intact. The lesson isn't complicated. Be careful who you mock. Be careful what you take for granted. And be very, very careful what you say on speakerphone, because sometimes the quietest men leave the loudest lessons, and mine would echo for years.